As we start to make this happen, I am Jennifer Vogel, and I head the marketing team. Big Ben just went off, and here at InterVision. And we have a couple things, just some housekeeping things. Chat is open to everyone. You're welcome to chat with us. You can enter your Q&A as well, and we will respond. We look for questions interactively through this session. Additionally, this recording will be available after the session. Give us until tomorrow to get it posted, and you'll receive a follow-up message. You can share it with your peers. You can access it on our website as well. We'll have some polling questions too, in fact, throughout the session, and we'll be doing live results. So be aware there's a poll window to the right of your WebEx instance. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. So first, we're up is going to be David Gaffney. These are both speakers are InterVisionaries and colleagues, and I couldn't be more thrilled for them to share their time with you. David's currently a cloud product director with us. He's got background like none other. He doesn't just know the cloud inside and out. He also knows end to end. So he is very experienced with discovery workshops, consultative engagements, and really looking at cloud adoption. So he's going to guide us through some cloud experience. And then we're going to turn it over to Zach Moore. And Zach is a veteran with InterVision. And he's currently the senior product manager of security and networking with us. And his background is a myriad of network managed services and security managed services. And he's been a key contributor in the overall development and implementation of hundreds of security and operations related customer engagements. So today, I really, really hope that you walk away with a better understanding, gain some knowledge, get smarter, and a couple things we really want you to walk away with, and that is knowing what the biggest cyber threat is, and how to combat that, how to thwart that with a shared security model, as well as tools alone, understand that tools alone don't protect your organization. So as we kick this off, David and Zach, welcome to all of our participants. We welcome and thanks for sharing your time with us.
Thanks, Jennifer. So as Jennifer indicated, I'm David Gaffney. I'm the Director of Cloud here at InterVision, and I've spent the last 20 years working for managed service providers in the IT realm in various roles: operations, pre-sales, service delivery, and product management. While the technology has changed quite a bit over that time period, some things remain the same. Operating systems need to be patched, systems need to be monitored, and things break, and those things need to be fixed. And so, it's sort of back to the future. Definitely the technology has changed, but a lot of the core functionality, the core blocking and tackling remains the same. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about configuration management in the cloud and how that relates to cloud security. We'll share some best practices and what you can do to make sure that your cloud environments are secure and optimized and performing well. And then we'll talk a little bit about what InterVision can do to help. But this is really designed for those folks to kind of understand what their obligations are and then what they can do to ensure that they're meeting those obligations under the shared responsibility. So I'm sure by now everyone on the call is aware of the many benefits of running workloads in the cloud. The cloud makes it easy to provision high availability. It allows unlimited scalability and rapid deployments, as well as pay-as-you-go pricing, so there's no need to purchase capacity in advance. Cloud-native technologies have allowed developers to achieve faster time to market with low cost of entry and accelerated deployments. And I could go on and on about the benefits of cloud computing, but for some people, the question remains, is the cloud secure? And the answer to that is, it depends. Cloud providers have a shared security model, which means that you must do your part. And that's known as the Shared Responsibility Model. It's a security compliance framework that outlines the responsibilities of the cloud service providers as well as the customers for securing cloud environments. In short, cloud providers are responsible for security of the cloud, physical security of the data centers, the core switching and routing, and the virtualization. Customers are responsible for anything they deploy in the cloud: access management, network configurations, operating systems, applications, containers, data, and code. Those are all customer responsibilities. And as I'm sure that you're aware by now, there are three main cloud service models: software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. Ownership of the security tasks within each model depends on the model you use. So today I'm going to focus primarily on infrastructure as a service, which requires the most configuration by end users. Cloud service providers produce regular audit reports to confirm that they are taking the necessary steps to protect their environment and the customers in their environment. So you can feel confident that they are keeping their end of the bargain. You know that cloud security breaches constantly make the headlines, but what you may not be aware of is that in nearly every case, it is the end user and not the cloud provider who failed to manage the controls used to protect. So instead of asking, is the cloud secure? A better question is, am I using the cloud securely? To help customers meet their obligations under the shared responsibility model and to assist with proper configuration, public cloud providers have created frameworks to define best practice configuration guidelines, as well as training modules which support these. These well-architected framework guidelines can have as many as 300 checks that users need to validate on each workload. And for many customers, that can be an arduous task. The security pillar in particular involves ensuring continuous security posture and compliance. Things like setting up governance guardrails, assessing vulnerabilities, assessing your workload design against industry standards such as PCI DSS, CAS, NIST, and more. And then implementing security controls, both proactive and detective. Cloud providers even include tools to help identify configurations that do not adhere to best practices. Azure has Azure Advisor, AWS has Trusted Advisor. Both tools perform checks of your environment against best practice configurations and provide recommendations to improve things like reliability, security, cost effectiveness, performance, and operational excellence. And yet, despite all this, misconfiguration in the cloud is common. In fact, the National Security Agency believes that cloud misconfigurations are the #1 threat to cloud security. They've created a report that goes into detail, highlighting some cloud misconfiguration horror stories that have impacted the Department of Defense and the defense industry. And if you think about that for a second, these people, the DoD and the defense industry, are trained extensively on security. It is part of their mission statement. If it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. So let's take a look at the most common cloud misconfigurations. Trend Micro has compiled a list of the most common cloud configurations based on the results of one of its tools, Cloud Conformity. And that tool reviews cloud environments and misconfigurations for adherence to best practices. The results of their findings were very interesting. Across all clouds, the #1 misconfiguration was disabled monitoring and logging. So these features are cloud native, they're built in, they're easy to configure, they're easy to deploy, they're very cost effective, very nominal in terms of what they can do to your cloud bill, but yet some people still don't turn those on for whatever reason. So that's a huge gap there. Security groups, unrestricted inbound and outbound ports being left wide open. That's the second most common. And then third, lack of validation. And while lack of validation is in itself not necessarily a misconfiguration, if your team is not actually validating that your environment is secured and is adhering to best practices, then you are subject to misconfigurations because they're going to go undetected. So within AWS specifically, the top misconfiguration, meaning in terms of the top configuration, in terms of high frequency, so how often does it occur, and high severity, what is the impact of that misconfiguration? So the top misconfiguration was AWS CloudTrail not being enabled. And so when that's not enabled, configuration changes will not be monitored or resolved. This means that users won't know who took the action, what action was taken, when the action took place, and what resources were affected by that action. The next top misconfiguration was EBS encryption not being enabled. So this could potentially expose data stored on the cloud to nefarious users, and not only data on the disk itself, but also any snapshots taken from that volume. The third was not setting up a rule to prevent S3 storage from public access. So that's fairly common. It's fairly easily resolved, and yet that still happens time and time again, where S3 buckets are left open to public access, which can reveal proprietary or confidential information. For Azure, the number one misconfiguration was Azure Advisor not being enabled. Again, it's very cost effective, it's easy to set up, and so it's just a matter of making sure that your team is aware of it and making sure that that it's turned on every time. The second one was Azure Activity Log not enabled. So again, not setting up logging so that the team can identify who did what when. And then the third one is kind of specific to Azure. It's related to Azure virtual machines, installing approved extensions only. And so when vulnerable extensions are used in Azure environments, this can lead to elevation of privilege types. So those are some of the top configurations from the cloud one. So let's talk a little bit more about configuration management and why it's so important for cloud. Configuration management helps ensure that systems are configured and maintained in a consistent, reliable, and secure manner. And consistency is really important in cloud because in a cloud environment, you're more likely to have multiple instances running of the same resource. And so it's really important to make sure that that resource has been created consistently and that consistency extends across all instances running that. The second one is relates to security. Proper configuration management helps ensure that all security controls and configurations are properly implemented and maintained. And then scalability is one of the essential features of cloud. Scalability requires that automation tools such as infrastructure as code for creating and management templates and for resource deployment are used. And then finally, compliance can be facilitated by using configuration management tools to ensure that all resources are configured according to whatever the regulatory compliance framework is that you're operating with. So, time for a poll question. Based on what I just told you, what is the top cloud misconfiguration? Is it A, default gateway not configured, B, security groups wide open, C, cloud storage closed to public access, or D, logging not enabled? And we'll give you a few seconds to Okay, well, the results are starting to trickle in. I'm seeing a few more results here. The good news is people have been paying attention, and so yes, it looks like the majority of respondents have correctly identified the number one cloud misconfiguration out there is a logging not being enabled, which is surprising because it's really cost effective and it's really easy to set up. People are just not doing it, or they're not aware that it needs to be configured and set up. So great. Thank you for that. All right, let's proceed. So let's talk a little bit about cloud provider tools. So in addition to the advisory tools that I already mentioned, cloud providers have created additional tools to assist with configuration management. There are configuration management tools such as AWS Systems Manager and Azure Automation. And these tools can help users automate operational tasks such as patching. And then there are infrastructure as code tools such as AWS CloudFormation and Azure Resource Manager. These tools allow you to deploy resources from templates, ensuring consistency. So you can use these tools for drift detection to identify configurations that have drifted away from the original configuration. And then finally, there are cloud policy tools such as AWS Organization Service Control Policies or Azure Policies. These tools are frequently called guardrails, and they prevent certain configurations from being deployed. For example, by restricting inbound and outbound ports or preventing deployment into specific regions, things like that. So what can you do to make the cloud more secure? Well, first of all, the key is understanding the shared responsibility model. Make sure your people are trained on configuration best practices, and then take advantage of the tooling provided by the cloud providers, such as infrastructure as code and monitoring tools, and then integrate that tooling. So for example, you could set up monitoring using infrastructure as code templates instead of configuring it manually. That makes sure that it's set up the same way every time and that it's standard and that it's uniform. And then finally, ensure that you have the people and process necessary to configure and deploy the tools. And then when it makes sense, use third-party tools and services. Of course, these two tools only work if you have people whose job it is to monitor, review, and validate the findings. And most importantly, they only work if you give your people the time to do this. So we're all very busy. We all wear multiple hats. But if you do not make this a priority, it's not going to happen, or it will not happen on regular prescribed intervals. So give your people the time to do this, make it a priority, develop and implement a well-defined process, and then of course, utilize automation. Those are the key to ensuring proper configuration management in your cloud environment. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that InterVision has a managed service that assists with configuration management. InterVision's managed cloud service. It starts with the onboarding phase where we run a security assessment tool, which evaluates your environment against best practices. We then present our findings to you, consult with you, and then remediate those non-best practice configurations. We'll then configure policy tools, enabling guardrails using AWS organizations or Azure policy. And then finally, we'll set up configuration management tools such as AWS config or Azure policies to monitor and alert on misconfigurations in your environment. So it's a combination of running an assessment during onboarding, setting up policy tools to prevent misconfigurations, so preventive control, and then configuration management tools, which are detective control that can advise us and advise you when configurations have drifted away from their ideal state. It's all part of managed cloud services in InterVision, which provides comprehensive solutions for managing your cloud environment, including 24/7 incident management, change management, configuration management, security management, patching, backups, and cost optimization. And this includes support for server-based environments, serverless environments, container-based environments, DevOps automation, including support for CI/CD pipelines. So now I am going to, actually, let's talk a little bit more about MCS. So MCS is a modular service. I talked about the modules there just a second ago. Server-based environment. So, you know, we run into another number of different environments when it comes to, you know, working with customers and helping support their environments. Some of them deploy in server-based environments and deploy applications on top of servers. Others are moving to more container-based environments. So Azure has Azure Kubernetes service, or AWS has Elastic Kubernetes service, or ECS. Those container-based environments are becoming a larger and larger part of the managed environments that we support because they allow for rapid deployment, rapid scaling, all that stuff, and can do it in a very cost-effective manner. But being able to manage that and have the expertise to manage that in-house sometimes is a challenge. So that's something that we can bring in. Same with serverless environments and DevOps automation. So we support not just cloud-native DevOps tooling, but also third-party tooling, a wide variety of CI/CD pipeline toolings. And we can not only assist in setting up the pipelines, but we can help managing them, and then also assisting with failed deployments, rollbacks, things like that. So something to think about there. And then also part of the suite is our managed cloud protection service, which provides managed endpoint detect and respond for cloud endpoints, both in server-based environments, container-based environments, as well as various others. That's all integrated into our solution. So Zach's going to talk a little bit more about that, but for now, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Zach Moore, who's going to talk through a little bit more about security in the cloud.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Jennifer. So my name is Zach Moore, and I am the Senior Product Manager for Security and Networking with InterVision. And a decade and a half ago, I started out as an engineer in what is now the InterVision Operations Center, though at the time was Netelligent. During my time there, I worked on technologies across just about every service discipline, and that includes infrastructure, resiliency, communication, data center, and cloud. 7 years ago, I pivoted to focus mainly on security. Since then, some of the positions I've worked have included leading our customer-facing Security Operations Center, or SOC, co-running our incident response program, and helping to stand up numerous security services with our product team. And those varied roles have given me a great deal of experience dealing with the pain of trying to make piecemeal arrays of different technologies and services and partners, often stitched together with little more than duct tape and hope, make those work together to achieve our clients' business outcomes. And unfortunately, during this time, I've also been presented with a lot of opportunities to witness firsthand what usually happens when those patchwork ecosystems, often paired with a lack of preparation, are tested and face attacks from determined malicious actors. So let me just say this. If there's one lesson that you take away from this entire webinar, it's this. The time to start taking security seriously is not the day after you've been breached, but for a lot of companies, that's when they start. So keep it in mind, act now before it's too late. David, if you want to go to the next slide. So why do I bring up patchwork ecosystems and poor planning? To understand the issues inherent here, we have to understand what security is overall. So in the world of IT, business needs are often addressed with tools. You need email, go get Office 365 or Exchange or Gmail or whatnot. You need to collaborate, WebEx, Teams, Slack. You need ticketing, ServiceNow, ConnectWise, Zendesk. You need security? What do you buy? Well, here down at the bottom, you see the tip of the iceberg. You see maybe 1% of the tools that are on the market. The security space is fragmented and diverse, with many vendors rarely hitting double-digit market share. There are a lot of tools that cover a lot of ground. And the reason for this is because there is no single silver bullet. No one product solves security because security is not a standalone business function. Security is a layer that goes on top of every functional aspect of a business. And as such, there are many, many tools available to fill a great variety of different specific needs. If you go to the next slide here. So you may ask the question, how do you deal with all that? Problem of solving the problem. Next slide, please, David. And there are steps that you can follow to sort through it all. And I'm sure everyone here has touched on at least some part of some of these steps, but I often see clients stopping partway through or only completing a few of the steps, and that can kill your effectiveness. First, you have to identify all the security segments that you need to address. Second, you need to identify and evaluate the tools that map to each of those needs and select some best-in-breed tools that fill your space. Third, you need trained experts to implement those tools. And fourth, you need trained experts to run those tools. And lastly, but not least, you need trained experts to build the processes around those tools that map to your business needs and business outcomes. If it sounds complicated and potentially exhausting, well, that's only because it is. There are ways you can make it easier, however, and finding a trusted service provider who has already done most or all of the work to gather these tools together, build these processes, bring the people together to run it all, it's one of the easiest. So because this is a cloud presentation, I'm going to run through a cloud environment from the ground up and identify both the security segments that you need to address, as well as how InterVision addresses them. So here on this slide, you see the shared responsibility model, because it all starts with infrastructure. The cloud is just really someone else's data center, and the equipment and infrastructure within that data center that you're using is provisioned as code. You may have virtual servers, virtual workloads, serverless applications, containered applications, file storage as code, scaling platform resources, edge resources, virtual networking, and more. And because every cloud is different and every cloud environment is different, and how it all works within your specific cloud environment is different, all of it is a divergence from how you've traditionally worked with on-prem IT environments. As such, the most foundational element that you need for cloud security is expert administration. As David discussed earlier, tools for this are quite often cloud native, living within that shared responsibility model. The technology part here is, we can call it easy as it gets. It's the people and processes that get tough here. When you need changes made to your environment, you need certified experts with knowledge of best practices and change management procedures to execute those changes so that you're not leaving holes behind that malicious actors can exploit, as David referred to in his notes on the NSA and their findings. So InterVision fills this gap with our managed cloud services solution. Certified expert engineers with years of experience in the relevant cloud native technologies, along with those all-important, already defined processes. This builds the concrete foundational base for your cloud security, ensuring that all of the complex and often misconfigured elements are locked down, including role-based access management, all of your logging, encryption, network access, and more. This is the walls of your castle. Once you build that solid foundation, however, you still need to regularly check those walls and make sure that cracks haven't appeared as your environment evolves during the course of your operations. And that brings us to our next need. If you go to the next slide, please, David. So you might ask, why is ongoing verification of existing cloud infrastructure required when best practice methodology is being used for deployment and configuration? And the simple answer to that is things change. There will be multiple major design projects going on in tandem with different priorities that can cause gaps to form between them. Or you might have application developers doing their own cloud configurations within your environment that may not conform to your standards. Or you might have changes in your frameworks, changes in software, changing compliance requirements. Or you may just be looking at undisclosed vulnerabilities that pop up. Things that weren't known last week but are discovered today and malicious actors are actively using to get into your environment. Any of these can leave holes, and these are what the bad guys look at to cause a breach. So with this in mind, it's crucial to have a plan in place to address auditing of your config over time. Now, these audits can be recurring one-time checks, such as well-architected framework reviews or WAFRs, or they may be part of a constant program of configuration oversight via Cloud Security Posture Management, or CSPM. InterVision has services built around both of these models, taking advantage of industry-leading software such as CloudSploit and Trend Microconformity, as well as cloud-native tools such as AWS Config and Azure Policy. These services can plug directly into our managed and professional services teams to quickly translate those findings, aka your misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, into remediation actions to minimize your exposure and your business risk over time. And reducing your risk reduces the cost of potential breaches, which saves money over time. So this is the inspection of the walls for cracks. Now we built the sturdy walls, we check them regularly. The next major need is actively guarding the perimeter to ensure the malicious actors don't get in through unknown methods. So if we go to the next slide. Zero-day attacks exist. Supply chains can be compromised. Humans can be phished. Encryption can be cracked. What this means is that even with the best vulnerability and configuration management programs, any environments can still be compromised. In the modern business world of cybersecurity, it is no longer a question of if, but when. If you weren't compromised this year, last year, Around 60 to 70% of businesses experience some sort of cyber breach, according to different sources such as the Verizon Data Breach Report, IBM Data Breach Report. It usually sits in the high 60s, and the average cost of a data breach sits around $4 million. So for this reason, you need to ensure that all aspects of your cloud environment are not just well configured, but actively protected as well. You've got the walls, you got the gates, you got the inspectors, now you need the guards. So with on-prem workstations and servers, it can be pretty easy. You get a solid endpoint protection tool, deploy it everywhere, and that just might do the job. With the cloud, however, it's not so simple. You may still have servers, and you may also have workloads, but there are also serverless applications. There are containered applications and container environments. There's virtual file storage. There's scaling platform resources. There's infrastructure as code. There are virtual networking. So how do you protect all that without deploying half a dozen different tools or more? Easy. You get managed cloud protection. We utilize a single best-in-breed software protection platform, Trend Micro Cloud One, that spans the gamut of cloud resources from service to serverless and storage to dev chain. And the tool is only as useful as the people and processes built around it, however. So we also provide a 24/7/365 team of experts to manage, alert, and provide remediation guidance around it. When you tie this in with our other services, such as MCS, we can even take those remediation actions on your behalf. So here it's all about reducing the mean time to detect, isolate, and remediate, aka reducing downtime and business impact caused by the actions of malicious actors. Again, reducing downtime and impact, like reducing risk, reduces cost. So going further than that, even on the right side here, you see, to provide broader event correlation, you can tie your managed cloud protection into Managed Detection and Response, or MDR. MDR pulls together all of your sources of security telemetry, including your managed cloud protection, your endpoint for on-prem, your infrastructure and networking, your authentication, your SaaS sources, all of your native cloud stuff, and all of that into a single platform, wrapping it all up with powerful analytical and alerting capabilities and a staff of experts behind it to run it. When you put that all together, that's how you get true organization-wide visibility for the biggest reduction in cyber risk and the greatest reduction to ongoing incident response and recovery costs. Next slide, please. So now it's poll time. How confident are you in your cloud security? How confident are you that you have the best-in-breed tools to cover all of the necessary aspects that need to be covered? How confident are you that your configuration is solid and free of gaps? Do you check everything regularly to make sure that things haven't changed? Are you carefully monitoring your environment for threats 24/7/365? Do you have incident response plans in place that are tried and tested? Do you have 24/7 monitoring and staffing to configure and monitor it all? Are you prepared to deal with an attack at 2 a.m. on a holiday weekend when half your staff is on vacation? Let's see what everyone has to say. I've seen various answers to this during my incident response time, and one thing I can say is that quite often after an incident response, we see a lot of customers saying, well, we were so confident before, but then you get compromised and all of a sudden, how do we get hit if I was confident before? Well, the reason for that is if you're not having everything audited, if you're not having everything verified, then you may not have an accurate picture. So it's important not just to have experts running everything, it's also important to have experts reviewing to make sure that everything is tested and working how you expect it to. So here I see a wide variety of answers with quite a bit of unease out there. And yes, that's how we see it quite often in the marketplace. Talk to InterVision, we can help. So next slide, please, David. So let's wrap things up. Once you put all the pieces together, you get the whole picture. A solid foundational base of ongoing configuration management, regular, well-architected or compliance-based reviews of all your applied cloud infrastructure to ensure it stays secure, whole platform protection, not just protection for a few pieces, covering all the varied elements of your cloud operations, and then combining it with that broad spectrum visibility, covering your cloud as well as the rest of your environment for correlated visibility to identify those anomalies and potential compromises quickly and then block them. And together, these services provide and integrate to give you defense in depth, which is an important watchword in security because no one tool will cover everything. You need a variety. You need a variety of protection against these malicious actors that would love to disrupt your cloud operations to line their pockets with your money. So if you get these services from a trusted, experienced partner such as InterVision, then underneath the hood of all these services, there may be close to a dozen best-in-breed tools, all pre-selected and vetted, all run by industry experts, and all wrapped in processes designed and tested against years of real-world scenarios and incident response testing. Technology without people and process is expensive, shiny, and ultimately useless. People without technology and process are idle and ineffective. Process without technology and people may as well not exist. So without all three of people, process, and technology, security cannot be achieved. If you think you have it, it's likely an illusion and you're at risk without even knowing it. These are the situations that lead to hard lessons learned at the incident response table. So as a last note, I'll say that with inflation and market uncertainty, IT budgets today are often running lean by necessity. But interestingly enough, in times of economic downturn, the frequency of cyber attacks often heads in the opposite direction, trending sharply upwards while the market tanks. And this is by design. The bad actors know that security is often not a focus when budgets are tight. And that's the ideal time to strike. So with that in mind, don't fall for the trap and don't put your business at risk. With the average cost of cybersecurity breaches topping $4 million, skipping on security today to save pennies can often end up costing you millions in the long run. The bottom line is you could do this yourself, but will you? Cloud security is complex and requires a diverse set of tools and skills that often doesn't translate from traditional on-prem IT expertise. And beyond that, it's not just the knowledge of how to operate in the cloud, but also the tool selection process, training, the expertise required to run those tools, and the experience required to build appropriate processes to integrate. Do you have the time and the people to do this? Are you making it a priority? Are you even able to? If not, consider working with a service provider such as InterVision and let us show you how our experience can translate to better business outcomes and better return on investments for you and your business. Thank you very much.
Hey, Zach and David, thank you so much. Every time we get together, doesn't matter how many times I hear it or interact with you guys, confidence is always built, right? You guys know your stuff. You've been around. You've been real world experience, right? You're not just theorists, you're also practitioners. So we did have a couple questions come in and hoping you can address them. First from Virginia, we had, how often do you recommend the customers evaluate their cloud configurations?
Well, ultimately, I think in a perfect world, you would be continuously evaluating your cloud configurations. Setting up guardrails, setting up configuration management tools and cloud policy tools to provide proactive and detective alerts when your environments have drifted from best practice configurations. But in the real world, we understand that a lot of cloud environments have evolved over acquisitions of other companies and different staff and things like that. And so the best time to do it is really now. Go in, do an assessment, figure out where you are, where you stand, and then what is the path to remediate and get back into a best practice configuration. If you're already there and you're already using automation and you're highly confident, that's great. But what we've seen in practice is that it's a mixture of environments that have been kind of brought together through business acquisition, through different teams, and through turnover in teams. And so if the cloud environment's been in existence more than 6 months, it's really a good time to do an evaluation to make sure that it is in compliance with best practice configurations.
Got it. So change and test, right? Change and test. It sounds like that's a good combination. We had something come in from Kansas too. So how many security tools are you seeing in your average customer cloud environment? Is that can we calculate that number? Do we see that number?
Varies wildly.
I bet it
The
does.
customers that are most at risk have very few, sometimes zero.
Mm-hmm.
They want to rely on the cloud provider to provide security, which isn't a thing that happens. Or they stick their head in the sand and hope that I configured it right when I put it in, so it's secure, right? Really, in a secure environment that's well run, that's got the correct people, process, and technology behind it, you're probably looking at between protection of all the pieces and parts, 6 to 10, which seems like a lot, but if you consider on-prem, you got firewall, you got endpoint, you got VPN, you got your encryption, you got your remote access, you got disk encryption, you got data loss protection. It's really not that different in the cloud. It's just you're protecting virtual resources instead of on-prem resources. So it's quite often a different set of tools doing the same thing. And it's really hard because they are all different tools to translate that on-prem expertise into what is running in your cloud. So it can get confusing. It can get difficult to dedicate the time and training to master, but that's where we can really come in to help.
All right. Well, fantastic. For our participants across the country who joined us today, thank you very much. I hope you've found this informational, generating the awareness, and just what InterVision has to offer. I implore you to explore additional resources that we have on our website. There are white papers. There's a lot of content in terms of just what do you need to know to boost your confidence, but also how can you share that information with your peers as well as your leadership. Follow us on LinkedIn. It is a daily post, a lot of information that's out there. You can interact directly with Zach and David. And I also encourage you to circle your calendar for September 13th. So we're going to do another online summit. It will be 4+ hours. Come and go as you please. We will have a Forrester analyst during that session as well, just discussing the trends. So we really are leveraging our ecosystem and hoping that you found this very valuable and worthwhile. Thank you so much for all of your time. Zach and David, a good day for you, and everybody be safe and cool out there. Thanks for joining.